Hi, I'm Tim Zacharias with Cougar USA and your host of Building Value. I'm very excited about this episode. I've got as a guest today Matt Lanza, managing editor and meteorologist with Space City Weather. Welcome to the show, Matt.
Hey, Tim. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Awesome. So on this episode, we're going to be talking about the site and how they got started, reporting during Hurricane Harvey, and what to expect from this hurricane season. On Building Value, we go behind the scenes of building operations to showcase the people and products that make buildings work and the value they bring to the community. Can you tell me about where you grew up?
So I grew up in New Jersey, was born in Atlantic City, and
Awesome.
so southern part of the state, not like the Sopranos part or what everybody's
Right.
used to seeing and about New Jersey. This is a nice part of the state, kind of quiet. Not much really happened in my part of the world. We're only 3 miles from a beach, so that was,
Yeah, that's pretty solid.
yeah, enjoy. Definitely have, coastal, need the beach not too far away, just to know it's there.
Right.
I don't always go and take advantage of it, but just knowing it's there is enough for me. So
Nice. So Jersey Shore, summers, boardwalk, all
Yep.
of that growing up. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, it was great. We favored Ocean City over most
Okay.
of like a lot of people like Wildwood or Seaside Heights or Point Pleasant, but we were Ocean City. There's an Ocean City, Maryland that's a little bit more famous, but Ocean City, New Jersey's got a really nice boardwalk. It's like about 2 miles long, and there's amusements and good food, best pizza, Manco and Manco's Pizza on the boardwalk in Ocean City. Oh, I miss it so bad.
Nice. Yeah, I'm taking some mental notes here. Gonna have to check that out next time we're up that way.
Yeah.
So, well, very cool. So what did you end up doing after high school?
So I went to Rutgers University in 2000, graduated in 2004. I knew I wanted to be a meteorologist ever since I was, probably, I don't know, 5, 4, something
Oh, that's
like that.
awesome.
Yeah, and there's, it's a common meteorologist story. A lot of meteorologists, not everyone, but a lot know when they're a kid that that's what they want to do. So like it was sort of like destined that's where I was going to end up. Maybe not at Rutgers, but going for a meteorology degree. So yeah, I went to New Brunswick, did the Rutgers experience for 4 years, which was great, loved it. Great school, have nothing but good things to say about it. And, the athletics were a little rough, but basketball program's on the up and up. Football program hopefully coming back, we'll see. So that was the plan, and graduated and didn't know quite what I wanted to do when I got out of school. I figured I wanted to be in broadcasting and do TV meteorology. A lot of meteorologists are either National Weather Service broadcast or continue to go on to school, go get a master's degree in research. So for me, it was broadcast, and I searched around for jobs and found one in Syracuse, and moved up to Syracuse, New York, to work part-time at a TV station there after school. So
Very cool. So,
yeah.
so you moved out upstate, started doing the on-screen broadcasting. So how does that kind of transition towards doing more of kind of what you're doing today, which is more, I guess, in-house meteorology, not necessarily related to broadcast?
Yeah, it's so what I tell people is that the difference from being a TV meteorologist and being a meteorologist anywhere else is just that your audience is different. As a forecaster, if you're doing research or something like that, obviously it differs. But if you're a forecaster, it's the same thing. You have a different audience. You just have different things that they're interested in, different concerns that they have. But you still got to be able to communicate. That's what makes a really good broadcast meteorologist, is one that can explain what's happening in a pretty short period of time. You get 3 minutes. So I worked in Syracuse part-time. I was mostly off air. Took one weekend where I was on air and used that to make a demo tape to get hired in Utica, New York, which is about 40
Nice.
miles east of there. And that was a full-time gig, on air all the time. So, you have to be able to, you just kind of go through the repetition and just get used to it, and eventually you become, pretty good at communicating. You're given 3 minutes. I used to have to fight producers. Can I get 15 more seconds, please?
Right. That is 3 minutes is not a lot of time to go through a forecast.
No, I mean, especially you're talking 7 days, right? So, I mean, everyone knows how it is here. I mean, the summertime, it's usually pretty straightforward. A chance of
Right.
thunderstorms every day, right? But, other times of the year, it's a lot more complicated. And, just getting those few extra seconds really helped a lot. And that's what you get good at. You get good at being brief and explaining things in a concise manner that people can understand.
Sure.
And that's kind of what I think helps in an environment where I'm at now, which is more in-house, working with energy traders and things like that, which is, I'm explaining weather information to them in their language, but kind of keeping it concise too, because they don't have time. They're doing a million
Sure.
different things also. So, yeah, I mean, just you got to be good at communicating if you want to be a forecaster, and that's becoming an even bigger issue now when you've got all these different organizations and companies, and everybody needs a meteorologist because weather's. I mean, we see it all the time. There's always a weather disaster somewhere, right?
Sure.
So it's critical to be able to communicate.
Absolutely. And it's, you talk about weather being so intertwined with everyday life and the effects that it has. When I got into our business 14 years ago, I guess, and I didn't really realize at that point how much weather affected what we do. And now, having gone through, I mean, it was there, Allison obviously before I started, but, Ike and the tax day floods, the Memorial Day, Harvey, all of this stuff recently. It's like, man, it is definitely, and then just even recently talking with some of the guys on the energy side, how much it's entwined with energy production and all of that. It's definitely not, weather is much more top of mind for me now than it was, however many years ago. So it's really interesting. So, I kind of heard from the energy guys what they're looking at or what they're wanting from the weather side, but from your side, what is the impact that you're having to them, being able to provide them the weather data?
Sure, it's multifold. Everybody wants to know. I mean, weather impacts how people use energy, right?
Sure.
The hotter it is, the colder it is, the more energy demand you're gonna have during in summer and winter. Obviously, it differs whether you're using air conditioning or heating, and just being able to provide them with kind of not even a specific forecast. Even though, if you work for like a utility company, I've worked for utilities in the past, sometimes that 1 or 2 degrees that you're off by can make a huge difference in how much,
Right.
They're expecting. But when you're talking kind of, I guess, more on the gas side and sort of bigger picture, bigger shops, just giving sort of the broad overview, it's going to get cold, we think it's going to get cold 10 to 15 days from now, or we think it's going to get warm, and what that means, and just kind of explaining it to them, can help them to make better decisions, get ahead of, potential issues and things like that. It's a lot of challenge. I mean, you're talking about 10, 15 days out, and like, everybody's like, well, can you even get days 3, 4, or 5 right? And that's why I say it's very general. You need to.
Oh,
be,
yeah.
The reality is you're going to be wrong. I mean, I know I'm going to be wrong sometimes, and the sooner I can accept that and just get into the forecasting of it all, the better it is. So, it's definitely a challenge, and it's definitely, I've got a mixed track record, but I think I'm pretty decent at it. But it's a lot of fun. I like that better than necessarily forecasting, days 3, 4, or 5, because it's so kind of out in the weeds, and it takes there's a little bit of art involved into it too. It's not just science. It's,
Right.
just trying to get used to certain things and a feel for how different models perform and what different patterns usually can lead to down the road, sort of a chain reaction, and that makes it a lot of fun as a forecaster. It definitely makes for a very good challenge.
Absolutely. Kind of that joke of if you don't like the weather, just wait 5 minutes. In Houston,
Right.
I mean, it's just constantly changing. So I can't imagine trying to even say like what it's going to be like later today, much less 5, 10, 15 days out with any sort of certainty. So definitely, I could see the art and the science coming together there with your predictions. So I guess you're kind of been doing the energy world for a little while, and you just, I guess, looking for extra work on the side, or did you have a passion to kind of jump off and start the Space City Weather site?
So it's kind of funny. So I moved to Houston in was it 2012, and
Okay.
the energy provides a lot of work for you. There's no shortage of stuff to do. And so Eric Berger, who wrote at the time for the Houston Chronicle as a science writer, he would always write weather stuff and basically had like a weather blog going there. And he was, I think, getting a little, not overwhelmed, but just had a lot on his plate. He needed to like, hey, I need somebody to help me out and do some Friday forecasts. So through a mutual friend, we got in touch, and we agreed to just kind of, I would start doing Friday forecasts. I think the rationale for me doing that is, so I was in between jobs at one point back in 2013 and 2014, sorry, winter of 2014, and 538, Nate Silver's website, was looking for freelance writers to write about weather, and I wasn't sure exactly where I was going to end up next, and I was like, well, why don't I just roll the dice and submit a writing sample and see, and they liked it, so I wrote a few articles for the website, and it sort of just reinstilled in me the idea that I like communicating weather information to people,
Sure.
So to help them make decisions. So when Eric came calling, it was kind of like, yeah, sure, I'll do it. I've got a little bit of bandwidth. I didn't have kids at that point, so it was like, I can do this. So I started working with him, and then he left the Houston Chronicle to write for Ars Technica, where he's the senior space writer there now. And once he left, he was like, hey, I'm considering taking this following that I have for weather stuff and starting our own blog. Would you be on board with joining with that? I'm like, yeah, sure, let's do it. And so we agreed to start Space City Weather, and it still had its little niche audience for a while there, and then I think once we got to Hurricane Harvey, it just kind of blew up and became its own thing. So it's a lot of fun because I just really I like communicating with people. I like talking to people. I like interacting with people too, even online. I mean, sometimes it can get a little frustrating and weird, and you get random commenters, but
Sure.
for the most part, most people are okay, and they just want information, and I feel that we serve a niche audience that looks for maybe a little different approach to presenting weather information than what they're used to.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. I mean, I found the site during Harvey, kind of leading up to it, and was just amazed at the amount of information that you were able to get across, like you said, in a kind of concise manner that wasn't alarming or overstated, or the cone of impending doom is coming, so it was great to get real information, because we were trying to make decisions about what do we do with our own facility, what do we need to communicate to our customers, what should they be doing for their facility, how can we help them. So it was amazing information leading up to the storm, and then obviously through the storm, I just trying to kind of make it through there, but for you guys to continue to work through that was awesome, and I know there's a bunch of people in Houston that appreciated that, so we thank you for that.
It was just a whirlwind those whole 2 weeks.
Yeah.
I remember sort of in the lead up to it, I'm like, this is a marathon, not a sprint, and it was every bit of a marathon. But for the most part, it worked out. It was one of those things, like in the week leading up to it, where we just sort of were struggling to believe what we were seeing in some of the model data, and Eric and I would exchange emails and be like, did you see the European model? Like, what? 50 inches of rain? How's that possible? So, after a while, it sort of became real that, well, this is actually going to happen, and we better be prepared for it. And, it was a good experience to help people out. I didn't, that was one of those times where I just didn't interact with people a lot because I just didn't have time. But I read through some of the comments at times when things got a little quieter, and the one stood out to me, and it's sort of it's emblematic of kind of why I think we do this. And it was somebody that was, I think, southeast of Houston, and they said that they had a whole bunch of belongings on their bottom floor, and when they started seeing how concerned we were based on how we were writing, they moved a whole bunch of things to their second floor, and it ended up that their first floor flooded, and all that stuff was not flooded because of that. And they were just grateful for that, and that just really stuck to me. Like, that is,
Sure.
That's why we do what we do. So people can make little decisions like that to, it doesn't ease the burden and the frustration of having to deal with it necessarily, but, it helps a little bit. And, we always like to say that, people after flooding events is just be grateful you have your life and all that. But yes, obviously, but if you can reduce a little bit more of the frustration of dealing with everything else in your life after that,
Yep.
all the better.
Absolutely.
So that stood out to me, and that's why we're here.
Yeah, and I bet you for every one comment you got, there's probably a lot more that were impacted that just didn't, take the time to make the comment. Because I know it was, like I said, it was great information for us, personally, and then also with our business was awesome. So, like you said, it was a whirlwind of a couple of days, and then I think we helped get, I think it was 50 or 60 buildings back up and running with replaced equipment and our service techs working crazy hours to make that happen and stuff. And yeah, it was I think it was about 3 months or so where I really just kind of a blur. After Harvey, it's like, okay, I think it was about Thanksgiving where I started to kind of take a breath and relax again. But yeah, it's and I think that kind of sentiment of seeing whether it's on TV or some posts on national sites or whatever, and you see like, oh, big storm coming, blah blah blah. But then if take a look at y'all's posts, and it's like, okay, it's not going to be, it might be bad, but here's some realistic information you can actually be actionable, make a decision on. So big difference.
Yeah,
and like you said, no hype, right?
Right, exactly. It's funny because, like, having worked in TV, like I'm very sympathetic to what broadcast meteorologists deal with and go through, because it's like, it's not usually them that end up coming off as hyping things. It's sort of the station, the platform,
sure,
the medium, whatever.
They got to drive viewers, right?
Yeah, exactly, and they just kind of get thrown into it sometimes, and but there is definitely a need for that. I mean, especially today with the information landscape changing so much. People want people they can trust, that they know that
Absolutely.
they can trust. And I feel that that's one of the things that we've done pretty well, as we've built up, and we've had some good luck, I think, in some of the storms that we've had with how we've approached them and handled them, that's helped. And people know that they can trust us, and they know that we're going to keep it on the level. And then when we dial it up, that's when we're legitimately concerned.
Yes.
And that's just, I mean, that's how I am with everyday life. I'm trying to keep it keep most things in as much perspective as possible. And then when, it gets crazy, then that's when it's time to dial it up.
Sure.
And we want people to listen to us. And in order to get them to listen to us, we have to keep it that way. And we're
Right.
lucky that we have, we don't serve really anybody. I mean, we have a sponsor, but, we have free reign over how we do things. So we don't have to dial it up. We
Right.
want to be boring most of the time. That's kind of how it is. The more boring we are, the better. And then when we get crazy, it's time to get crazy. So
Yep. So I think one of the other great tools that y'all have put out recently that's been helpful as well has been the flood scale. And that I feel like that was kind of maybe born out of Harvey as well, or at least in the other floods that happened in the years past. So, how did y'all come up with that, and how have y'all used that since then?
So yeah, I think it was after Harvey. Eric and I were sort of like doing the postmortem on everything, and one of the things that we sort of came to the conclusion was that people, particularly with rain events after Harvey, we noticed that people were really getting amped up every time, which is totally understandable. When you've been snake bitten so many times, you're just
Yes.
expecting it to happen again, right? So what we thought was, well, is there a way that we can put this in just some kind of context to let everybody know that, hey, this is not the next Harvey, this is not the next tax day, and that's sort of how we came up with the idea of doing a flood scale, sort of like a 1 to 5 kind of deal, and it just hopefully can help give context to people ahead of rain events. It's funny because it's like this is one of those things that, like, Matt coming out of college would never have thought about doing, because it's like, I don't want to step on anybody's toes. I know that, like, maybe this can interfere with, like, the National Weather Service or getting the message out and everything. You're trying to have sort of a unified front, between all your, the National Weather Service likes to talk of people in media as partners, which we are, and
Right.
fortunately, I think that the way we constructed this sort of is in line with how they've done a little bit of work too for some of their partners. So that was good, and I'm really happy that we did it. And so what we did is we created one iteration of it, and we sort of ran with it, and people tended to like it. Every time there was going to be a significant rain event, not just a chance of storms, but like, hey, we're expecting a couple of days of rain. This might be heavy. We might be talking flooding. Here's what we're thinking. And then we sort of refreshed it and revisited it. And basically, one of the hardest challenges was going back, and we wanted to give not just the scale of like, here's how bad it's going to be 1 to 5, but here's an event and where
Examples.
it would fit in that scale. Because people just know what they've been through. So you've got Harvey, you've got Allison. Those are obviously going to be your upper echelon events, and then you've got Tax Day, which is up there, and I forget what some of the other ones were. Imelda is definitely up there for some folks.
Imelda, Memorial Day, Ike, Allison.
It's just one after the other.
On and on.
Right?
Yeah.
And one of the biggest challenges with that is getting people to understand and realize that just because you flooded during an event or just because you didn't flood during an event doesn't mean that your outcome is going to be the same the next time.
Right.
Just because you didn't flood during the 2 examples that we have for a 4, and we forecast a 4, it doesn't mean you're not going to flood this time. So, it's very important to I don't want to call it hedging, but we have to caveat it a lot because people need to understand that flooding is not a uniform thing. In Houston, it varies wildly and depends on a lot of things. So that's been our challenge.
Yeah, and it even seems very, focused in the different parts of town where the storm is and things like that. I mean, I feel like I've seen articles where you're like, well, it might be a 2 event in this northeast corner of town, right? I mean, it's that focused, where, you might see broadcasts or other things just saying, hey, it's going to be this much rain forecast in Houston, right? And so this is just even more so locally. And I don't know if it's a function of the distance from the coast or if it's the actual highway or something, but I-10 seems to create this barrier of weather, and I don't understand what it is. So if you know what it is that's happening along I-10, because I live right on I-10, and it just seems to be such a weird dividing line for weather.
Yeah, it's one of those things that it's useful in a lot of ways. Like we talk about I-10 and we talk about 59 a lot because they're just frankly, they're just useful geographic boundaries that most people understand. Like, oh, okay, I'm on the north side of I-10 or I'm on the south side of I-10. So people get that. But there is something to be said about the actual physical weather. And it doesn't have to do with the highway, but it's just where it's located. Typically, especially this time of year, springtime, what will happen is you get this warm Gulf air. You get kind of warm air that comes off of plateaus in Mexico and gets funneled up into South Texas, usually out ahead of cold fronts. And what will happen is that warm air that's aloft will end up what we call capping the atmosphere. So, typically temperatures decrease as you go up in the atmosphere, right? It gets colder. But sometimes in this time of year especially, you'll get all of a sudden a warmer spike. And what that does is it creates almost like a point in the atmosphere where clouds struggle to kind of build above. And what will happen is that'll suppress thunderstorm development. As you get further away from the Gulf and further north, you lose that. So you can end up getting thunderstorms that'll develop, pretty more rampantly. And a lot of times from I-10 south, the cap ends up holding, and we end up being, just some light rain showers or, an isolated storm or something. So it's a little bit of an arbitrary boundary, but it's, I-10's about 50 miles inland from the Gulf. So that's about a good point to start saying, okay, that's where things start to change and transition in the upper atmosphere to allow for more thunderstorms. So, you'll get people, and I love some of the comments we get from people saying, the force fields have been activated around Houston or along I-10. And it's just cracks me up. And it's like, you're right. You're right about that. I can't argue that one.
That's hilarious. Well, I'm glad there's actually a scientific explanation for the results, because otherwise I was like, man, I don't know, because we see it all the time. I mean, we literally live right on I-10, so I've always been curious about that. That's cool. So, kind of been talking kind of in the past year of these past weather events, and in 2020, on top of the pandemic and everything else, we had very active storm season, running out of name storms and almost running out of the Greek alphabet too, I think, right? So, what are you seeing when you're looking forward to 2021? Here we are almost, a month away, 6 weeks out from hurricane season. What do we have in store this year?
It feels like it just ended, right? So now here we are doing it all over again. It was, I mean, honestly, by October, I was just so spent that like you could have put a Cat 5 in the middle of the Gulf and I probably would have just shrugged my shoulders and be like, whatever. It's just,
this is 2020. Just good luck.
You just hit that point of burnout after all last season. Yeah, this season will be, so last season was very straightforward. It was easy to see in advance. It was going to be a busy season. Obviously, nobody thought it was going to be as busy as it was, but we knew that it had the potential to be a upper echelon season. And this year, there's a few things that have changed. The most significant one is last year we had La Nina, so that's where waters in the Pacific Ocean around the equator are generally a little cooler than normal. Typically, what will happen is when those waters get warmer than normal, that helps to increase westerly winds, trade winds that go across the Pacific and into the Caribbean. And what that'll do is that'll shear storms apart. That'll rip them apart, basically. It doesn't really happen. It sounds more dramatic than it actually is, but it helps to hinder them. Whereas in La Nina, you lose that, and the winds are a little bit more conducive for storms to develop. Well, this year we're still technically in a La Nina, but if you look at most of the forecast data, it points to us kind of transitioning out of that. I don't know if we're going to go into an El Nino or if we're just going to go to what we call neutral, which is normal-ish conditions. Sometime by later in summer. So that should, in theory, at least take a little bit off the top right away, right? So right there, that suggests that you're probably not going to have as active of a season. Great. But on the other hand, the Atlantic Ocean is just, it is boiling relative to average. It's just, even relative to last year, it's warmer than it was. So you're going to be able to sustain some of these tropical waves. There's some hints in some of the seasonal modeling that maybe there's going to be a little bit more of a robust wave train coming off Africa next year, so that gives you more disturbances that could develop into storms. Basically, like what I would deem it as like buying lottery tickets. Like each disturbance that comes off Africa is a lottery ticket, right? And then you're really not going to hit on all of them, but a few of them will end up cashing in. So if you have more of them, obviously you have more odds of hitting. So that may be what we deal with this year. Now, last year was kind of interesting because it wasn't entirely storms coming off Africa. It was disturbances that ended up in the Gulf that were a little bit weaker. The Gulf was crazy. It was just one after the other after the other. I think parts of Louisiana were in the cone last year like 8 times or so. I don't know what, it was ridiculous.
Yeah, they got hammered.
Yeah, so if it's more Atlantic driven, that's not necessarily bad news for us. But it means you have to watch out for the Ikes and storms like that from time to time. So, I think basically what I would tell people is to expect a busier than normal season this year. Obviously not as busy as last year. Hopefully not as busy as like a 2017, which was also, that was Harvey, but there were a lot of other storms that year too.
Sure.
And, I think people sometimes, because of last year, will forget that 17 was a really active season. So I'm hoping it ends up under that because it's definitely not going to end up like last year. But never say never, but it's probably not going to end up like last year.
All signs, yeah.
Yeah. So we'll see.
That's good news for sure. So what is it, what are the kind of the models, I think seeing GFS and the European models seem to be, is that the two big ones? But is that what you're using for the kind of day-to-day type
yes
forecasting? Is that also what you use for looking at this far out, or are there other tools that you use for that?
Yeah, so you talk about the GFS, the American model, European model. Those are all the day-to-day tools that we use. And
okay.
Now the European Center puts out what we call weekly forecasts, which are 6-week out forecasts, and then monthly forecasts, which go out, I think, 6 months. So we look at that for sure. So you can call that the European model. It's just a monthly version. In the U.S., we have not the GFS, but the CFS, Climate Forecast System. And that forecasts kind of out into a seasonal direction. And there's a number of other models that are used in sort of, there's this experimental tool called the NMME, which is the National Multi-Model Ensemble. And it's a whole bunch of different models kind of mashed together. And what that gives you is a good baseline average for the next 4 to 6 months, kind of what you should expect in theory. Now, obviously, the big caveat to that is when you're forecasting out that far, there's a lot more uncertainty, and climate models, I mean, they can be hit or miss sometimes during the season. Now, they all generally do an okay job and get within the ballpark, but I mean, there are definitely some misses. And it's interesting. I mean, like there's precedent for seasonal hurricane forecasts to fail. I mean, we think we're going to have an active season this year, but so back in 2005 was the previous benchmark season, I think, to last year, and then everybody was amped up and expecting a super active 2006 as well, and that ended up being just a complete dud of a hurricane season. So I mean, there's precedent that this could completely fail and not end up being active at all. Which, great, let's do it.
That would be awesome.
Where do I sign?
Yeah.
But yeah. So we look at those climate models, and sometimes they have different things built in, like precipitation anomalies over certain areas. And you can see like, oh, okay, well, it's got higher precipitation than normal over the Gulf or over the Caribbean. So that would indicate or imply at least that there's going to be more storm tracks through there. I think even the European model has its own calculation of storms that it spits out for a season, which is, I don't know how that works. I haven't even seen this year, so I don't even know if they have one yet. But that usually comes out at some point. There's things to watch. And then honestly, just as a forecaster, I look at other forecasts. And I look at what like Colorado State, who I consider to be sort of the benchmark for this. They're not always right, but they do as good a job as anybody, and they explain it very well. They issued their first call back earlier in April, and they're calling for an above-average season, but below last year. So I like to read through some of their rationale. I think it's kind of interesting to help us, sort of focus on what to expect for the forecast. And really, I mean, those are your big things. They're like, what is La Nina or El Nino going to do, and what do wind speeds and water temperatures look like? If you can kind of pinpoint those three things, that's, I don't know, 60-70% of it. Kind of gets you to that point, and then just kind of fill in the blanks as you get closer.
Sure. And I guess a lot of people are familiar with disaster preparedness in relation to hurricanes, especially they've been in Houston or along the Gulf Coast for a period of time. But we've had this freeze event recently. We've had some other weird issues with some related to COVID and not, like the water supply issues, things like that. For people that are maybe new to the area or just trying to update their disaster preparedness type stuff, what is some advice you may have for either at their house or somebody that's managing a building, things like that? Either things they may not think of related to weather or tools that would be good for them to look at. What kind of advice would you have for them?
Yeah, so there's a few things. Number one, I would say if you're a homeowner, have flood insurance, whether or not you live in a floodplain. Does not matter what flood zone you're in. If you're not in a flood zone, because it's that erratic, and it doesn't. The flood maps are generally drawn to bodies of water, and a lot of the flooding around here is caused just by the sheer volume of rain that falls too much too fast.
Sure.
And that can lead to flooding. So that's absolutely the first thing I tell people. The second thing I would say is to kind of know the history. I mean, know what flood zone you're in. Know which bayou watershed you kind of drain to. Are you in Braze? Are you in Buffalo? Are you in Sims? Just depending on where you live, it's helpful to kind of do that. And I think the Harris County Flood Control website has a map of the bayou watersheds, so you can kind of I don't know if you can input your address, but you can see generally based on where you live which bayou you drain to, because then that's the one you're going to want to watch, right?
Yes. Watch those levels.
Exactly. And I will say that Harris County FWS.org.
Great site.
Oh, just a phenomenal site. There's rain gauges all over the county and some of the surrounding counties from Harris County as well that you can look at on there. I mean, that's almost always up in my saved tabs, just to look at.
Yep.
And one of the cool things that you can actually do is, if you wanted to, you could go back to Harvey, you could go back to,
Yes.
not really
It's
Allison,
very cool.
the inundation mapping. If you check the
Yes.
inundation layer, you can see generally what should have flooded. That doesn't mean the property flooded. That just means that there was probably flooding at that point. So it's extremely helpful, and every Houstonian should know it. So kind of know your history a little bit, and ask your neighbors, what was it like during this storm, that storm. I think it's those are the most important things. And then just being aware and understanding that. A good example, May of 2018 or 2019. There was a day where we were expecting thunderstorms. Nothing really out of the ordinary. Just it was a late spring, early summer day. There were going to be some sea breeze thunderstorms that developed because it was going to get hot. And they ended up dumping 10 inches of rain on Kingwood and close to 10 inches of rain on Sugarland. And it was just those two little isolated areas. It was just a typical day. There was really no real reason for that to happen. And the reality is that can happen. It's just in the wrong set of circumstances. So you just always need to be weather aware. And this is not like us. This is not me pitching necessarily our site. Sure, we'd love to have you come check it out. But you just stay in tune to the weather. Your weather app on the phone is just not going to help you. You need to have some kind of context around what's happening. And that's where, either visiting our site, watching the broadcasters, whatever it is. I know that there's the cord cutting and everything that people do, and they just open up their phone and look at it, but there's just zero context there. You need to have that context in Houston. It's just the reality of where we live. And just understand, what the most serious risk is that day. The severe weather stuff, we don't get too much severe weather here, thankfully, like tornadoes and hail and wind, but we can get it from time to time. So, I mean, like living here is like living anywhere else, I think, in terms of being paying attention to that. And I think that the freeze that we had in February was very illuminating, because it can happen. And I even wrote a post on Space Day Weather, like, hey, here are some past freeze events that we've had in Houston and how cold it got. And there was all sort of the same kind of script. Temperatures dropping down 5 to 10 degrees, and it was like 3 or 4 days of brutal cold, and then that's it. But that's the thing, is there's a history here.
Mm-hmm.
Things have happened here in the past. Look back at some of the hurricanes that we've had. Just kind of understand that history a little bit more, and that'll give you some sort of framework to kind of move off of, kind of going forward.
Sure.
And what I tell people is just, especially the last few years with respect to hurricanes, is just whatever the forecast is, just expect something to be a little bit above that. Because we're forecasting the most likely scenario, and I feel like we've had so many instances in the last few years where above the most likely scenario has ended up coming to fruition. So, particularly for people that are planning around that as building managers or businesses or whatever, I think that's important to kind of understand and make more effective decisions.
Sure, plan for the worst and hope for the best, right?
That's it. Better than the alternative.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny, it wasn't, I don't think it was the same day where it was Kingwood and Sugarland, but there was another day where basically inside the loop, like around the Galleria area, similar thing happened. Like in the afternoon, just out of nowhere, just dumped.
Yep.
I don't know how many inches, but I mean, storm drains were overflowing. And I remember my wife went to go get a haircut inside the loop, and I was like, I don't know, I think it's going to rain later. I don't know if that's a great idea. She's no, it'll be fine. And she got stuck trying to make it back in, basically sitting on the side of the road waiting for the water to go down because of the 610 I-10 interchange had flooded. And I think it took her about 4 hours to get home.
Oh, my gosh.
So it doesn't take much in Houston to get caught off guard with these massive events. So, yeah, definitely have experienced that.
Yeah.
And it's funny, you mentioned that the flood warning system, I think is what it stands for, the FWS site from Harris County. That is such a cool site to be able to drill into, like you said, the levels of the different bayous and watersheds and everything, but also to see the real-time weather or rainfall precipitation is really slick. And you can go into, say there's one that's near your house or your business, you can go into it, set up alerts, and if it gets, an inch of rain falls in 15 minutes, something like that, it will shoot you an email and give you a heads up. And those have been really helpful for personally at my house. I have, because I figured I also have a weather station on my house, and I figured if I've noticed that if I get 2 inches of rainfall an hour, that pace, that our streets flood pretty much every time, right? And so to kind of be able to associate that, then you can even be more prepared. Like, okay, well, I know that my street's going to flood or whatever it is, but it's also been nice, by the soccer fields where my son plays, it's like, okay, I can check and see if it rained there today without having to drive all the way over there and see if the rains are playable. So that's been a really cool tool to be able to use.
Yeah, and I think that when you mentioned the 2 inches in an hour is definitely that's the right benchmark. I think that usually that's when I start to get, all right, let's sit up a little bit and see what's going on here, because that is you just no drainage system can handle that. It just doesn't exist, and
it's a lot of water.
It is, and that's something else. Especially myself coming from the Northeast, I don't know people that have moved here from elsewhere. That's one thing that people, I don't know that everybody really fully appreciates and understands, is it's not how much rain falls. You get 10 inches of rain over the course of a day, fine, you might have some flooding. But if you get 10 inches of rain over the course of 4 hours, that's when you have real big problems.
Major issues. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's the rate. It's so important. And we try and emphasize that as much as possible. Is that you just focus on the rainfall rate, and that'll get you, a good understanding as to what's happening.
Yep, and I'd have to go back and look at my weather station. It posts its data to Weather Underground, and so I can go back and see the historical data. And I think there was sustained 4 inches an hour at my house during Harvey, for especially that. I feel like that Sunday was pretty ridiculous. So it registered over 30 inches before I finally lost power and it stopped calculating all that. But yeah, it's it's gotten to the point where my wife is kind of, she rolls her eyes a little bit when I start, geeking out about the weather. But it's just become so important. Yeah, I'm sure for you, but even more so. But yeah, like we said, it's so much a part of our daily life now that you can't ignore it.
No, and that's one of the things that I sometimes think about. Like, boy, it's just it's exhausting living in Houston sometimes, because you're just constantly dealing with one weather disaster after another, I feel like. But at the same time, I kind of view it as like, well, it's kind of a badge of honor, as a meteorologist, like to be here and to forecast, for people here during who knows what we're in now, whatever this is. Hopefully it gets a little bit calmer over the next few years. I think we are due for some calmer weather for a couple years. So, it's a privilege to be able to do it, kind of in a place that I think, Houston's going to be an example for a lot of other places. How we handle this stuff is how a lot of other places are going to have to think about things as time goes on. You talk about climate change and all, and what it all means, and other places, they're going to be dealing with disasters in places that maybe never flooded, or fires in places that never had issues, things like that. Just because of the combination of population growth and climate issues, it makes it a real challenge. And hopefully we're doing the right things here and improving, hopefully improving our quality of life here with some of these flood projects and everything that we have going on.
Absolutely. And once you're ready to retire, you can just move to Southern California, where it's just sunny and 70 all the time, and just take it easy, right?
Exactly. It's the retirement plan. San Diego.
There you go. Awesome. Well, Matt, any other kind of words of wisdom or anything about the site, or anything else that you wanted to share before we kind of wrap things up?
No, I mean, we'd love to have you check it out. If you've never checked it out before, please do. And if there's ever anything that you're interested in or that you want to know more about, just let us know, and we'll try and find some time to do it. I'm trying to find some time to write. I want to write more posts about some past events in Houston, like from way back when. Because I want people to kind of understand our history a little bit more. But if you ever have any questions about, why this, why that, let us know, and hopefully one of us can get back to you. And we try, working our regular day jobs, and then this sort of being a side project that's not really a side project anymore. It's kind of become a bigger thing. So
sure,
we try to make time where we can. But we appreciate everybody's support that's been with us, since Harvey, pre-Harvey, after Harvey. It's been phenomenal, and it's something we truly think of it as a responsibility to people, and we take that very seriously.
Awesome. Well, definitely appreciate what you guys are doing. Love seeing the email from Space City every morning to be able to kind of get some context for the day and see what to expect. And, definitely as we move more into hurricane season, even more so, appreciate what you guys are doing. So thanks again. And, hopefully, like you said, we don't have the higher than expected hurricane season that's predicted, but, hopefully we can all kind of take it easy a little bit, especially everybody over in Louisiana that got hammered last year. Hopefully they get a little easier go this year. But Matt, I really enjoyed having you on today. It was awesome talking with you guys. Like I said, I've been a huge fan of the site for years, so really enjoyed it. Thanks for coming on.
And thank you for having me, Tim. It was great to be here and chat with you for a little bit, and thanks for your support.
Awesome. Thank you. Also want to thank everybody for listening and watching to this episode of Building Value, and we hope to see you on the next one.